Wir zijn da. Okay. This closer. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. That little bit over. Good. Okay.
There was told everyone. Is this good for me?
Oh, I just didn't see the picture. Yeah.
Okay. The parsha the Torah describes was relationships between people that bring about halachic problems. The Torah sets for us parameters as how to deal with those problems. So we have one situation which the Torah describes, which is not necessarily as germane in our time, and that's a master and a slave, an Eved Ivri. So the Eved Ivri is at a disadvantage because of his position relative to the master. So therefore the Torah sets for us parameters as to how you can treat an Eved Ivri. How you have to take care of him. And in fact, the Gemara comes to the conclusion that the parameters are of such a nature that Misha Kona Eved Le'atzmo Kona Odon Le'atzmo. He who has purchased and acquired a servant really has acquired a master. You have examples of that in your own life, right? If you bring an Ozeret in the house, so when she's in the house, she's running the house, you aren't. That's the nature of the relationship. So by setting these parameters, you cannot strike him and you cannot abuse him. You have to give him the best that you have. In fact, he comes before you do. The Torah, therefore, strengthens the hand of the servant at the expense of the master. And this is done, the Mefarshim point out, to minimize the attraction of having servants, of having slaves. Because many times it ends up economically and socially to be a disadvantage, not something that you want. The Torah in this week's parsha also describes the relationship between employers and employees. So there also, the natural tendency is that the employer has the upper hand. However, again, the halacha tempers that. There are famous cases that are brought in the chuvas. I hire somebody and I tell them the hours of work are 9 to 5. Okay. Even if I'm willing to pay him extra overtime, can I force him to stay after 5? There may be a pressing need that the employer has. And because of that, therefore, the Torah limits the power of the employer. And the Torah says you have to pay him on time. You're not allowed to delay his wages. The Talmud points out you have to pay him a fair wage. So again, we see that in this relationship that looks like the stronger person is the employer. To a great extent, the employee is the equal, if not even the superior person here. It's especially true when the employer is dependent upon the work of the employee in order to be able to continue to function in the profession or business. And that's a very personal relationship, employer-employee. Now, in our time, when you have gigantic corporations, and, like if you're running the Ford Motor Company and you have 40,000 employees, so the relationship is not that personal. So that's why you have the rise of labor unions, and that's why you have strikes, and that's why you have all the confrontations, because it becomes impersonal. And when the relationship loses its personal quality, it becomes much more contentious. Finally, we have the relationship of someone who lends money to a borrower, which in many respects is the most difficult of all relationships. The Torah warns us, lo tia lo kenoshe. So it doesn't say lo tia lo noshe. We're not talking you're not allowed to oppress him or take advantage of him simply because you lent him money. Kenoshe. It's enough that it's like it. And we find it's discussed in all of the Mefarshim and in the Chuvas. If I lend you money, so before I lend you the money, we're very good friends. Otherwise, I wouldn't lend you the money, right? I have trust in you. The moment I lend you the money, a doubt occurs in my mind whether you're trustworthy. I'm not certain you're going to pay me back. And I'm not certain you're going to pay me back on time. So the relationship becomes fractured almost immediately. So the Gemara says, you can't go out of the way to meet him on the street because he'll think that you're pursuing him for the money. So it becomes a very skewed relationship. And the Gemara says, "Evet lo vekish liishmalve." The borrower always feels that he's a servant. He's a slave to the lender. And that's really one of the reasons why lending and borrowing became impersonal through gemachs, etc. Because then you're not dealing with the person. Or you're borrowing money from the bank. It's impersonal. And Benjamin Franklin's famous advice was neither a borrower nor a lender be, because it fractures relationships. And the Torah recognizes all of that. So when the Torah speaks about the halachas, that the parameters that bind all of these relationships, the Torah is aware of the psychological problem between them. And that oftentimes results in much more damage and ill feelings than the financial transaction itself. So these are things that the Torah itself warns us about. They're part of human life. No one escapes them, but nevertheless, one should understand what is involved in such a relationship. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, Otsa Kadosh Baruch Hu l'sachar Yisrael, Sicha Chirba Lahem, Torah and Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chavesh Van Sitko.